Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. For those of you that are coming on for the first time, my name is Juan Londoño. Today's topic is a little bit between regular photography topics and the Photo Philosophy Friday topics, but not really. The topic is the ultimate way to control light in the future, because it's not here yet, but it's coming soon. Let's check it out. So let's begin by the light that we're not discussing, or the adjustments that we're not discussing. We're going to dedicate ourselves to adjustments within the camera. So the things we're not discussing, the ultimate way to adjust light, let's talk about natural light first. First topic, natural light. We're not talking about natural light. We're not talking about the sun, and we're not talking about the moon. Can we control those? Yeah, we could put shades up, we could put mirrors to kind of direct it and amplify it. We're not talking about this type of light, okay? Another source would be artificial light sources like incandescent light bulbs, LED lights, halogen lights, fluorescent lights, compact fluorescent lights, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on, right? We're not talking about that either. You know, pulling out a light bulb, plugging it in and using that. Not what I'm talking about when we discuss in this video the ultimate way to control light. Yes, you can control light with those. You can add tons of light, you can remove light, you can move light around, but we're not talking about that in this video. We have a better solution. The last thing we're not talking about in this video is all this stuff we're not talking about, right? And here we are talking about it. We're not talking about reflected light. So the light coming off of buildings, the light coming off of snow, the light coming off of mirrors, the light coming off of the lake, the light coming off of whatever you decide to use. Boards, you know, aluminum foil, which is, there's a story behind that. I actually used that as a reflector once. But we're not talking about that light. Yes, you can control light with all of these things, but we are not going to discuss those in this video. We have a super duper way to control light that doesn't really exist to the degree that we're going to cover it here. But I'm telling you, it's coming. You just have to wait around. Take care of yourselves because it's coming, I promise you. We begin with the 3 ways that most people control light on the camera, right? Aperture, shutter speed, and I.S.O. Let's begin with aperture. Is aperture the optimum way to control light? Is this going to be the optimum way in the future to control light? You can pause the video now and you can stop and think about it and wonder if opening your lens and closing your lens is in fact going to be the best way going forward to control light. It's not the one I'm talking about in this video either. But it's a good one. Let's talk about why it's not the optimum way. Although aperture is a fantastic way to control light, right? You open the lens and more light comes in. You close the lens and less light comes in. There's a direct correlation between aperture and depth of field. The more you open your lens, the less depth of field, right? The more shallow the depth of field, which means the stuff behind your subject and in front of your subject is blurry. The more you close your lens and you block light, minimize light, you make your image darker, the more you're increasing your depth of field, right? So more things behind and in front of your subject will be clear and sharp and focused. So is that good or bad? Well, I like that. I like that because if I want to create depth of field, well, that's how I create it, right? I open up my lens more and I create depth of field. But it makes it a terrible, terrible way to control light, because if I want to let more light into my picture, but I don't want to make my depth of field shallow, I'm screwed. I mean, that's it. I'm screwed. I have no other way. If I want to minimize my light and I want to make my aperture smaller, right, blocking the light that's coming into my camera, but I need the shallow depth of field. I want stuff to be blurry in front and behind of my subject. I can't do that because everything is going to be completely in focus because I've closed my lens. And that's one of the characteristics. When we come down to it, it's controlled by Mama and Papa Nature. That's it. We have no control over that. It's physics. The more you close your lens and you block the light, you increase your depth of field. So if you want to minimize the light with your aperture, controlling it with your aperture, and you want a shallow depth of field, not gonna happen. So is aperture the best way to control light going forward? No, it's not. It's not. It's a fantastic way, but it's not. Can I have a way of controlling light where I decide what depth of field I want, and then I can control light some other way without affecting my depth of field? There is a way. We go now into the second way, shutter speed. Is shutter speed the answer? Feel free to pause the video and think about it for a second. Well, here we have a different type of correlation. See? Shutter speed, which is controlled by the shutter inside your camera, not on the lens, not the diaphragm on your lens that controls the aperture. It's in the camera inside, right by your sensor. It opens and closes and lets the light in. If it opens slowly, it doesn't open slowly, it opens and stays open for a while and then closes. The shutter speed is slow. It opens and then closes. It lets a lot of light in, right? But if it does this, where it opens and closes quickly, it's blocking a lot of light. It's not letting a lot of light in. There's a direct correlation, for those of you that have done photography for a while, between shutter speed and blurriness, right? If you open your shutter and leave it open for a second and there's something moving across your lens, it's gonna be blurry, right? You have to open and close quickly to freeze that action, to capture that. That's what you do, right? In sports photography, when you're trying to capture water in a crisp way, where you want to see every little drop moving around, you have to increase that shutter speed. If you want the waterfall to look dreamy and slow and kind of, blurred, because that's what it's doing, then you open that shutter and you keep it open for a few seconds, and then you close it, right? So what if I want to increase the light, because we're talking about controlling light. I want to increase the light in my photograph because I'm running out of ways to control it. I've already opened my lens as much as I can, and I've already increased my ISO as much as I can, and I still don't have enough light. So I go to my shutter speed, the one we're talking about now, number 2, shutter speed. And I make it slower and slower and slower, meaning I keep it open longer and then close it. Now my pictures are coming out blurry. So is that the best way for me to control light? It's not. I got dizzy there for a second. It's not the best way to control light. You see why now, right? Because the opposite is true. If I need to darken my picture, and I've run out of all the other options for the same reason, Aperture and I.S.O, right? I'm down with the lowest I.S.O my camera has, 100, so I can't darken it there. I'm up to, 22 on my lens, and I can't darken it anymore there, and it's still too bright. So now I have to increase my shutter speed, but what if I need my picture to be a little blurry? Not an option. I can't do it. No. So what the heck is left? What do I have left? I don't have aperture, and I don't have shutter speed. Well, we know there's a third one, right? It's I.S.O. So we all know how this channel works. If we're going to discuss something, we need to understand it. So what the heck is I.S.O? I bet so many people on this channel, right, including me for a while, have used I.S.O and never stopped to ask what it means. Well, I.S.O stands for International Standards Organization. Before, when I started shooting pictures with film, it was A.S.A. It was not I.S.O. What did A.S.A stand for? Same thing. American Standards Association. So it was a group of people that decided back then with film, if your film had a certain sensitivity to light, they gave it a certain ASA rating, right? It became later I.S.O rating, an international standard, because it affected more countries. They later took this definition of, how sensitive to light something was and what rating it got, and brought it into the digital realm, right? So digital cameras now operate the same way. The sensor inside your camera, which is kind of like what film used to be, has a sensitivity to light, and you can adjust it. That's the cool thing about digital cameras. Before you put film in your camera, it was 400 ISO, and that was it. You were stuck with 400 ISO until you took all the pictures on that roll. Well, we've talked about this before. There was a way to cheat that, but it was complicated, and many people jammed up when they were doing that. Overall, whatever film you had going in is the film you had until you finished the roll or decided to cut the roll short, right? And just, you took, let's say 3 or 4 pictures and you needed to change ISO, well, pull that roll out, you know, wind it back, and that's it. You know, you spent the roll, the money for the roll, you only got 4 pictures out of it. What can you do? You have to develop it now. But with digital cameras, we have the ability to change that. So what can we do with ISO? Well, we can increase the ISO right now to a certain point, but then we start getting a lot of grain. That's going to be kind of the mama and papa nature part of this piece about ISO, right? There is some physical limitation right now that as you go higher with ISO and you increase the light of your picture, because you're making your sensor more sensitive to light, you're introducing more grain. But the truth is, it keeps getting better and better and better each year. And it's starting to get to the point now when digital cameras came out, they had ISOs up to 6400, which in the film days, that was fantastic. That's as high as you could go. Digital cameras started out with that, and so nobody complained. Everybody thought, yeah, this is pretty good. This is what film does, right? You can shoot at 100, 200, 400. 800 starts to get a little grainy, right? And then you get to 1600 and it's kind of like semi-useless. And then of course you go up from there, right? 3200 and 6400, it was kind of, it's better to, the mentality is it's better to take a picture than not get a picture at all, right? So if you're a journalist and you're trying to capture some scene of the war, or you're capturing some corrupt, meeting that's taking place, yeah, I'd rather get a grainy picture than no picture. So absolutely, those films had a purpose. And for effects as well, right? If you were artistic and you wanted to create an effect. Other than that, they were useless. So the digital cameras were in the same realm. They came up with this 6400 ISO and they were pretty useless. Then it went up to 12,800. Then it went up to 25,000 and 50,000. Then it went up to 100,000. Now, many digital cameras are at 200,000. I'll tell you a little secret later. I can almost guarantee you that either DARPA or some other government agency has a contract out there with one or many of the camera companies to improve the technology that reduces grain in digital photography. I guarantee you. Why? As you know, we have drones in the military. And even before drones, we had the SR-71 Blackbird, and we had other spy planes that flew. SR-71 flew at 70,000 feet that we know of, right? That was published. Who knows what it actually did. That's outside, that's at the border of our atmosphere, basically, right? Just under it. So from up there, it can take clear pictures of your enemy's territory, and even in low light. How did they pull that off? You know how they pulled that off. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory. It sounds like it, right? Well, the government has things that they can't share with the people. No, it's always been that way. I worked with the Department of Defense for 10 years, and there were things that we were working on that we were not allowed to share. When GPS came out, I remember they would tell us clearly, the people, meaning us, right, civilians, are allowed to get GPS accuracy to this number. Back then it was like 10 feet. I mean, that's pretty good, right? If you can reach something in your car within 10 feet, you're going to find a store, right? Unless you can't read. But 10 feet was unacceptable for the military. When they're dropping a missile on something, they have to be within, I think it was within 1 to 3 feet. Now it's pinpoint accurate, right? Even for driving around, it's pinpoint accurate. So you can imagine what they have. But let's leave the government out of it for now, right? Let's keep it simple. Commercially, there is a huge need for photography to be clearer, right? Sharper, with lower grain, maybe with more pixels so they can enlarge it better. That's just a need, right? And companies, camera companies, are pushing in that direction every day, more and more. And they're getting finance from private corporations that are looking for that as well. Think about it. If you're a Toyota, a Honda, a Ford, wouldn't you want your automobiles photographed and plastered on the side of buildings tack sharp? Not where it looks sharp from a distance and then you get up close and you can see the pixels, each pixel is the size of a soccer ball. No, I'm talking about tack sharp from any distance, right? That would be beautiful. Companies like Bugatti, which used to pay Hasselblad camera companies, you know, photographers that use Hasselblad to shoot their cars for the prestige, you can shoot that now with a Canon. So what are we really talking about in this video? Well, for starters, I'm talking about water. It's water break time. And you know that it happens in every video, right? So pause the video. I want you to be healthy. Go get your water. I'll be here waiting. I promise I'm not going anywhere. Actually, I'm going to take a sip. That was noisy water. So where we are headed in this video is this. Check it out and see if you agree with me. When I.S.O. which is now at amazing levels, right? Even if it hasn't made it completely into our cameras, you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. When I.S.O. hits numbers that no longer will be a problem, that we can just crank up and up and up and up and up and get more light in our pictures without much grain, this is what we'll be able to do. You'll be able to see something that you like. Like, for example, let's say a landscape scene. And you want your f-stop to be 8 or 11. So you dial it in. You put your lens on 11, f11. And you want your shutter speed to be 125. You dial it in. You change your shutter speed and you set it to 1/25 of a second. Now say that it's kind of the end of the day and it's a little dark. Your photograph's a little dark. No problem. Why isn't it a problem? Because you take the I.S.O. knob and you start turning and turning and turning and turning, and your light comes up just to where it needs to be, and you stop. And there's no grain. Oh, isn't that freaking cool? That's where we're headed. Believe me. The funny part of all this is that I.S.O. is going to get so good and you're going to be able to crank it up so high without grain that when you do want grain, you're going to need a grain dial to bring grain into your pictures. Oh, is that a cool freaking idea? Canon, I hope you're listening because I would love for you to be the first company to do this. I hope so, right? It could be anybody. Why? Because otherwise you're going to be limited. The other limitations we talked about, those correlations where things are attached, well, you're going to be attached here too. If you want grain, you're going to jack your I.S.O. to 1,000,000. And if you want a low I.S.O. and you want grain, well, you can't do it. Well, you can if there's software in your camera where you can jack up your I.S.O. or drop your I.S.O. and no matter where it is, you can just dial a little grain knob and make your picture more artistic through software. Oh, that's a cool thing to have. I can't wait. But the point is the same nonetheless. The point is that we're going to have the ability to pick the depth of field we want with our aperture, right? I want to shoot a model and I want everything behind her and in front of her or in front of him and behind him completely blurred out. So I open up my lens and I let a lot of light in. And then I want my shutter, my shutter speed doesn't really matter much, so I set it to whatever. But if my picture's too bright or too dark, I can leave those settings alone and I can just dial the I.S.O. whichever way I want it. I could drop it to really low levels, below 100, 50, 25, 12, 6, 3, without any repercussions. Or I can go up to 1 million, 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, right? 16 million with relatively low grain. Isn't that going to be really cool? Is it? For starters, is that even considered manual photography anymore? Where you can dial one thing in and, well, technically it is because you're dialing things in. You're not letting the camera do it, but you're dialing one in, you're dialing the other one in, and then the other one, you just turn the knob till the light is good, right? You can either turn it till you like it, or there's a little meter like cameras have, and it'll go to the middle when the light's good, and you can stop there and just trust the camera, or just put it on some semi-automatic mode where you pick the aperture and you pick the shutter. Cameras already do this, by the way. I think the R6 does it for Canon. And then it just picks the I.S.O. that makes that happy. Woo! And then it can go up and down accordingly. Who cares? There's no grain. Perfect. So it's kind of like a semi-automatic manual photography, if that makes any sense. The next question is that making photography too easy and taking away that challenge that photographers love? I love the challenge that I want the model to be clear and I want the background to be blurred, right? And sometimes I can't do that with the aperture I need because I need the aperture to be more closed because it's too freaking bright. And I need the aperture to be more closed And if I need to open that lens, if I start closing down that lens, right, to make it a little darker, I lose that shallow depth of field, right? That bokeh maybe. So I love those challenges because it makes me look at my ISO, it makes me look at my shutter and say, what can I do with my shutter to achieve this? Oh, I'll increase the shutter speed, right? You start to see these limitations and these, things as a photographer, and you sit there and you go, oh, but there is a way around this, right? I can control this one a little and this one here. Sometimes I'm gasping for air. I'm gasping for light. I'm trying to go up with my ISO till the point where, I'm starting to get grain. I got to stop here. And my shutter speed, I start dropping it. And I can't go below this point because my pictures get blurry. And then I start opening my lens, and that's where wait a minute, but I want a clear depth of field. I want a good depth of field. I don't want a shallow depth of field. I don't want to open my lens anymore. What can I do? I'm running out of ideas. I don't have any other way to get light. It would be cool if I had an ISO button that I could just keep cranking up. This will make photography easier, inevitably. And it might take away a little bit of that challenge that we enjoy. It's going to give us a little more flexibility for sure, and that's always good. But that challenge that we love as manual photographers, I'm afraid it won't be there to the extent that we enjoy, because we can crank up the ISO wherever we want it. We just have that total freedom. So would you pay a camera company to limit your ISO so that you can be challenged by your photography? I think no, right? No, it doesn't make sense. Why would you get somewhere and then go backwards? That's the dilemma we're talking about here, right? We're going to get this flexibility that we're absolutely going to love and we're going to get addicted to, but then the challenge is gone. Or do we keep the challenge, right, where we're struggling with our camera and we don't always have the ability to take the picture we want because we're limited? The third question, which is kind of an interesting topic here, and can be a Photo Philosophy Friday topic really, is would this feature make it so that just about anybody could be a professional photographer, right? And take great pictures? I think, if you ask me personally, there's always going to be a difference between a professional photographer and everybody else. But I think it's going to be more difficult to be a professional photographer because cameras are becoming so good, even cell phones are becoming so good, that professional photographers are going to really have to up their game, right? Things like composition, all the things that normally we don't think about a lot because it's ingrained in us, they're going to have to be mastered, right? That's going to have to be like mastery level. What we know about aperture and depth of field and shutter speed and blurriness, right? All that stuff, mastery level. We're going to have to know our cameras really well and all of the features, because that's how we're going to maximize all that as professional photographers. Otherwise, anybody could do what we do because everybody's going to have access to the technology that we have. Everybody has access now, except with film cameras, everything was mechanical. So photographers had a real advantage over most people because most people thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to get into that. Where you have to adjust everything? No way. So there was a clear difference between professional photographers and everybody else. Then digital cameras came out that made buttons, a lot easier and configurations a lot easier. All of a sudden, the professional photographer was up here and everybody else started catching up, right? Woo! Now, when you introduce this feature where you can just crank the ISO up and down and just get fantastic pictures all the way around, a person just has to learn the basics of what aperture does, shutter speed does, and ISO does, and that's it. They can take some amazing pictures if they understand composition and all the stuff that we know. But if you are good and you have a passion for something, you're always going to stand out above everybody else, right? I mean, that's just the way it is in every field, not just in photography. Both the government and the private sector are wanting and needing this technology, and they're going to continue to push forward. Everybody wants a higher, clearer ISO reading. And we're going to get to this dream camera that we're talking about not too long from now. Now, why do I say not too long from now? In 2013, check out the date here, 2013. This video is being recorded in 2021. That is 8 years ago. Canon announced a camera in 2013 that had 4 million ISO at its disposal, okay? And 2 years later, in 2015, they released the camera for $30,000. Now you go, ooh, that was a lot of money, especially in 2013. Well, yeah, it was. It is, even today. But Hasselblad, which I love, by the way, it's a great camera. You know, I speak of them like I'm knocking them. They were unique. They are unique. They're an amazing camera. They're built like tanks, and they do their job very well. Back then, you know, their cameras had like 40,000 megapixels when everybody else had like 12, or were, you know, graduating to 24, right? And on the outskirts of like 36. They were working, you know, in 40 and 50 megapixels, but their cameras cost 40 and 50 grand, right? So for 30 grand, you were getting a camera that had 4 million ISO. I mean, let's give Canon some credit here. Nice job, Canon. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, Canon invented the digital camera. That's it. It's the way it is. I know everybody's got a favorite camera company. That's okay. They're all great. They all do a fantastic job. I'm a Canon person. I think I've said it before. And not because of that, just because I love many of the things they do, specifically their lenses. They have this, you know, I'm sure I would too, right? If I invented something like that, this need to always be on top, right? Because you want to continue showing that you're leading the industry. No matter what you shoot though, whether it's, you know, Fuji or Nikon or Sony, they're all amazing cameras, right? We're beyond the invention date. That happened a long time ago. Everybody's stepping up their game. Everybody's striving to be on top. But my point here is that in 2013, 4 million ISO, okay? So you can imagine 8 years later what exists. Now, my camera doesn't have 4 million ISO, and probably neither does yours. So it will someday. Maybe you're watching this in the future, you're gonna be laughing, going, ah, you know, I'm at 100 million ISO, you dumb idiot. So maybe, right? But that's not the case right now. Right now, we're dealing with like 100 and 200,000 ISO. I wonder what's out there. I wonder what the Department of Defense has. I wonder what Canon has that they're going to release later in the future, right? That maybe they're not supposed to release right now, right? I know there's a need for cameras in the cities, right? To be able to identify people for, you know, child trafficking and women trafficking and just, you know, people trafficking, right? Human trafficking. Wouldn't it be great if a camera can be far away and identify a face in the evening? Yes, there's a need for that. Absolutely, there's a need for high ISO and high megapixel counts where you can crop something almost indefinitely and get a sharp image. Yes, technology has to be pushed. We know that. So if that was the case in 2013, we know it's coming, okay? So hence this video. That's what it's all about. The need for the high unlimited ISO is there and it's being pushed. And we know that in 2013 it was 4 million. What is it today? Well, I'll leave it up to you if you want to do some research. I haven't. I need to go in and see where some of these camera companies are now. I thought I read something recently where cameras were going to be mainstreaming at 4 million not too long from now. So it's around the corner. 4 million ISO is coming. 8 million ISO is coming, you know? Just like 4K TVs are commonplace now. You can get them for $200 and 8Ks are now out, right? The question is, at what point does it stop mattering, right? Because my eyes can't see it probably beyond 8K. So with ISO, it's going to be a little different. The higher you let me go, the more flexibility I have for my pictures. How long before we can dial in whatever freaking ISO we want to complement our, you know, chosen f-stop aperture and our shutter speed? It's only a matter of time. We are now at the end of the video. If you found this topic interesting, stimulating, right, please like down below. And if you are not a subscriber already, please subscribe. Hit the little notification bell because that will give you a little ding dong on your phone when, you know, I upload another video every week. And that's basically it. We have come to the end. I love you guys. I want you to stay healthy so you can keep coming back. Drink your water, take your vitamins, and until the next time, love you all from the heart. Ciao for now.